in the very beginning, I want to start, as we live in a wartime situation, I would say, well, let's shoot from the big cannons and with quick reloading. And my question would be, are we really ready for EU enlargement? Because the situation is really complicated. We are not in a very big, I would say, compromise inside our small European fish pond. We don't know what is the relations with somebody on the other side of the bigger pond, over the big pond. Our economy is performing quite poorly. We don't know whom to trust. So in this case, is it more important for us to keep our house in order, or is it appropriate time for making our house bigger and in Europe, and to make our family bigger? And if not, why?
Hi, everyone. Short answer is it is an appropriate time, but we as in Europe are not ready to do it right now. I have two questions for the audience, actually, and I would like you to raise your hands after each of them, if you agree. So, first question is very simple. Do we want more countries and more people inside the European Union? Please raise your hands if you agree. Yes, the majority is here. The majority is here. And the second question, are we ready to sacrifice part of our cohesion money and agriculture money in order to do it? Okay, very nice. It's a very good audience. Oh, no farmers, I'm sorry, yeah. But this is exactly currently probably the main question among many partners in the European Union. What is the cost? And the cost is typically quite high. The agriculture policy has always been very sensitive, and right now still is, since there are a lot of countries who have very huge influence from the agriculture business, from the industry, towards the policy making. And this is why in the enlargement talks we are often concentrating on how big the X should be in European Union, and how we can ensure that the new countries possibly joining European Union can follow up to the standards and actually don't crush our economy in here. And the second question, which is very important for Baltic states, is how we can ensure that we still have enough money for regional investment from European Union funds, and we can still proceed with some cohesion projects which sometimes are not very efficient for our societies, but in many occasions they are the driving force for the economies outside Riga, Tallinn or Vilnius. But just to kind of close up this first comment, it is a crucial time for us actually to proceed on enlargement, because this is also the question of European security. The countries within European Union, they're not waging a war against each other, and also they are stronger together, and it doesn't matter if they're in NATO or out of NATO. Of course, it's kind of different discussion, but if they are strong together economically, it is easier for them to defend every inch of their border. So it is our common interest that there are no more conflicts or no larger conflicts in Europe, which is unfortunately, well, not guaranteed for us, and will not be guaranteed for actually many years to come. So this is also the question on that, but short answer, as a union, currently, today, we are not ready for enlargement, but we should be ready quite soon.
If you ever decide to moderate a panel, choose wisely whom do you give the first word. Otherwise, Artyom's just recently destroyed all my questions for the future. Uh, yes, thank you. You're free. Yes, Natalia, I will give you the floor to you because you most probably have definitely other point of view because you might think that it is necessary for Europe to be ready and exactly at this time.
First of all, thank you. It's great to be in such a lively panel with a moderator that set the bar very high on engagement. Thank you to Maria and the Baltic Initiative for the invitation. My answer to this is ready or not, here we come. And I think that it's clear that we have such a challenge and such an external attack on Europe's security, Europe's democratic values, that whether we want to or not, we need to together decide what we're willing to sacrifice in order to maintain peace and the possibility for future prosperity on the European continent. We were discussing right before the beginning of the panel, I think there's very little discussion about values, and the discussion about values has become very empty. There is a term that one of my professors likes to use. It's called isomorphic mimicry. Look it up. Lent Pritchett wrote about it. So it's basically a lot of people talking with the same language, but not really understanding what is behind the words. Like when we say values, what is behind that? So why do we want to join the European Union? Is because of these values. So the people in Moldova, in Georgia, in Ukraine who are sacrificing, in other places in the Balkans who want to join the European Union, they are not just choosing geographically between East and West. They are choosing a set of values. And those who wrap themselves in the European flag wrap themselves in these values. And they are willing to sacrifice in order for these values to come true. What I see a lot lately I think that in order for Europe to be able to receive Moldova, it has to become stronger from within first and foremost. Because sometimes I worry whether there will be something for us to join. And I think that this point was made earlier in the panel, that Europe and European values have to be defended with a lot of passion from within. So, there is this dichotomy between the concepts of democracy delivers versus democracy is worth fighting for. I see a lot of, both are necessary, don't get me wrong, but we've gone so much towards democracy delivers that we've raised generations and generations of people who think, well, in bad times, if it doesn't deliver, then I need to look for a different model. And somehow, they are turning towards autocracies. But it's not just about material values, and it's not just about prosperity. It's prosperity combined with the individual freedom to exercise your rights and to fulfill your potential. So to me, this is Europe, because otherwise, we could go east, no problem. So I think the important thing is to start talking more and more about sort of what are we willing to sacrifice for security and the European way of life on the European continent, and start each of us making those sacrifices. I just returned from the US, where I engaged with some of my, I went to my master's reunion, and I engaged with some people, for example, who work in the State Department or in other institutions, and they are confronted with this question of whether, they go along with some of the decisions and so on. And I've met quite a few people who already have resigned, especially those who are close to retirement are retiring, because they don't want to participate. But then I had a call of action for everybody, you know? Look, Ukrainians are sacrificing their lives because they want a different type of model, because they want to decide their own faith or fate, right? And faith and other rights. And you know, I can say the same for Moldova. You know, we are after the war we had stagflation. You know, when people talk about inflation, you know, when you had in the U.S. an inflation that is incomparable with the 38% that we had in Moldova, where, you know, our households paid 50% of their income on energy bills, while the average European family pays 5%. You know, and when I listen to this, I say, well, aren't you willing to sacrifice your job? Like, you will find a job. You're an educated person. You will find a job. But each of us might have to make a decision, make a sacrifice for the greater good. If we don't do that, you know, and we think, are we ready? Are we not ready? If we continue to hesitate, if we continue not to take brave decisions, both to defend our values, but also to ensure a better future for our children, then, you know, the bad guys win, basically.
Just before this panel, we had some email exchange also with Goran, and one of the things you suggested is the discussion about there is this, I don't know, yeah, you have to make a decision either to make European Union integration deeper or make European Union wider. So how do you see this conflict coming together, probably?
I mean, I think it's important that you understand my own trajectory, because I do not come with a single worldview. I still travel on what is now North Macedonia, or Macedonian passport. I live in Berlin, and I spent quite a significant time of my career in Budapest, actually working for the guy whose auditorium is named after. And that really, really influenced. So first of all, I think it's a fake debate. Why? Because actually when you say we, let me challenge you, who is we? You know, because Viktor Orban will immediately accept in the European Union Serbia, Republika Srpska, maybe even Georgia, certainly my own home country that now acts as a satellite state. Immediately, because he will not put the rule of law requirements. He will put a very die-hard transactional politics. Are you with me? Are you against me? Do you serve my interests? Do I make money on you or not? And boom, done. You are into EU, you are into the club because you're my buddies. And I have to say, that's why actually this, you know, the deepening versus widening is a nice cover-up where actually a lot of smart and good, well-meaning politicians and whatnot, they would like to cover behind what is an institutional debate. Let's talk about people, let's talk about money. What are the incentives of today being a pro-European? Those students, and I'm really glad that early in the morning we mentioned them in Serbia, they are not wrapping themselves in the EU flag, because actually they used to do that until last year. And they're not wrapping because the previous Chancellor of Germany came and said, lithium is dearer than your values. And that's, look, they're super smart people. Actually, and because they're super smart, they don't go in party politics. And that's also our problem. And you know who is our? People who still believe in democracy. And I think that's an issue, because actually, without having that legitimacy, so actually the battle, it's not about widening versus deepening of the European Union. The battle is, do you want to have a transactional European Union in which actually when you say, you know, you put the, I call it the butter versus guns debate. Oh, you took my butter to buy those guns. And, you know, the reason I accepted Maria's invitation, I actually in the Balkans and in Germany, I don't speak on EU enlargement debates. To me, that's the saddest the saddest fora. I came here because actually I wanted to be optimist. And you know why I'm optimist? Because you guys have done it, and you guys have done it in your own way. And even if that's not replicable, there are so many small and medium and big things that actually could be taken over. One of that is believe that in spite of your local animosities, little whatever conflicts and whatnot, together you're stronger against adversary. The other thing is because you've done your math right. Now, look, I can challenge. Being a really well-versed in Eastern European politics, I can tell you we have way too much neoliberalism take. We all too much, everything we judge through the lens of money and whatnot, and you do not see what you get, while those people in US you don't. For example, public health and whatnot. Mind you, that you don't get in today modern Hungary. You don't get it. You don't get also in many of the candidate countries. Actually, that's why people are leaving. But what I want to mention is that actually what we have to start talking is who will profit from this bigger, bolder, and stronger Europe. And who will profit as elites, who will profit as business, and who will profit as individuals. And that's not always the same. And I can tell you, political pro-European elite cannot profit. The Western Balkans has demonstrated that the business model of being pro-European bankrupts you at the elections. We will all root for Moldovans to succeed on their policy when the elections come this summer, but they're this close. You know, they have. Why? Because there is an alternative governance model which is not based on good governance, which is based on bad governance and delivers locally. And in the Balkans, it's already perfected. You know, this morning we heard actually even Albin Kurti, who is a very interesting, colorful character, not out of your usual Western Balkan playbook because of his leftist leanings and whatnot. Even he understood, I play as a naughty boy, this brings me more benefits. You collaborate, look what's happened. Tell me the name of the prime minister of my own country that actually accepted all EU conditions, changed the name of the country, and they were ready to start negotiations in order to change then to say, oh, wait a second, Bulgaria has an amendment, and so on. Or you probably forgot when Slovenian says, oh, it's a golden opportunity now to enlarge our access to sea, and we're gonna torture the Croats until they gave us, because we will never, ever have an opportunity like that. aka bilateral disputes, and so on. And I think it's really important, because to me the debate now is whether the Europe in which also the elites will say, hey, you know what, I'm going to lose that. The trade surplus towards Western Balkans is 11.4 billion. That's probably insignificant in the large scheme of Europe, but it's not insignificant if you're a German company. And I think if you're a German company who owns a significant business there. And I think we have to start thinking with those lenses, and then actually in those lenses we have to make an argument that the good governance will profit you, both in Hungary and Serbia and alike. And then actually the enlargement debate and the deepening debate will be debate about a democratic, really uplifting Europe, rather than a Europe of an internal club and those who are knocking at it.
So to continue is, you mentioned values, you mentioned also financial gains probably, and you mentioned the financial losses probably for thinking. But we all know that any kind of reform processes that are necessary for EU enlargement, this is not like a sweetest piece of cake you would wish to have on your table. So what would be those necessary things to say probably to those potential member states that there will be more pros for EU membership than possible cons? Because this discussion is always also on both sides. What should we do to convince on both sides that it is more profitable for both of us, and then the losses are less? Natalia, or maybe you.
So first of all, I completely agree with what Goran said. So when I say we, I say, people who adhere to the European values. I'm a Europhile, whether I'm in Moldova or not. And by the way, one of the advantages that Moldova has that sort of people don't really talk about is that we are a country of 2.6 million and 1.5 million citizens have Romanian citizenship. So we are virtually all members of the EU already. So, it's about sort of how we organize ourselves in our society and our country and how we keep the Russians out. But moving beyond this, I believe it's key to have conditionalities. At the same time, it's key to get over the bureaucratic sort of handling of these conditionalities, right? So in Moldova, and I would bet in the Balkans as well, sort of I see a lot of slogans about the EU. Again, I return to my isomorphic mimicry concept. The EU is good because it's good. And European integration is good, but none of us know what it means. And countries that have gone through the European integration process know that it is extraordinarily complicated. It requires a lot of capacity. It requires painful reforms and smart negotiations. So my worry for Moldova is that because it's all about slogans and there's a lot of secrecy around what it means because, we don't want to have an honest discussion about, what we need to sacrifice because it's all about Europe delivers, democracy delivers. We're not willing to have an honest discussion. And the collective intuition of the voters is to reject dishonesty. I really don't like it when sort of conservative parties go further right just because they think it's a sort of popular issue. But you could never be authentic like the far right is. So don't go there because the voters are going to punish you because you're inauthentic, because you're dishonest. So in Moldova, I think we need to have an honest discussion about, not only the benefits, because everybody's like, we're going to have more money, we're going to have better infrastructure, we're going to have, but also, in order to achieve this, we need to really go after the criminal activities or, really work all together. So one thing that I don't see is sort of, it's always like, there's the European Union, and then there's the other party who wants to be member of the European Union. If we worked as a team and said, what can we do together to best ensure that you have functioning democratic institutions, that your justice sector is reforming, that your business is operating better, then we would all agree, because it's not such a complicated process. Like, for example, let's take trade, right? If we renounce the CIS free trade agreement, immediately as we enter the EU, there will be no industry in Moldova, which is already very, very, very small. So we have to look at, together with the European Union, at each sort of product and say, okay, so what can we do to find a different market? What can we do together to increase the quality and the standards? And how long do we think this will take? And then you agree on a transition period, right? And yes, politicians in Western countries have to be able to explain to their citizens why this is good for them ultimately, because I still cannot believe that how poor the communication is on why Europe needs Ukraine. And why it's so dangerous if Ukraine falls. So I think we need to work together, look into the details, work with conditionalities, transform these countries. But I always see sort of low-hanging fruits. Like, I see this agreement that is very easily reached by organized crime and money laundering organizations throughout Europe. They are integrated. They have no problem with integration. But when it comes to sort of us standing up and saying, no, you know, we are glad you want to join the European Union, but you need to stop, you know, some of this illegal activity. There's a lot more that could be done and is not being done. You know, and yes, some of it falls, I think, to the country that wants to join, right? So for example, it took us a while, but we got the 4 ultimate beneficiaries of the big banking fraud that Moldova had on sanctions list. I think we should do the same with corrupt judges. You know, I think the unexplained wealth order in the UK is a very powerful tool. You know, if their children are studying in UK universities or other EU universities and the money is unexplained, then we should act. Because it will be better for everyone, including their children, if we are able to defend the European Union and expand sort of this model to these countries. Because it's not just about the money. When a Russian soldier comes and kills your family, it doesn't matter how much money you have.
Just wanted to further move the question forward. For example, you mentioned different additional probably sanctions to untrustful people. Do you think that, no, well, corrupt or... Yeah. Such actions, can they in some way influence the attitude towards Europe? That Europe is aggressive, Europe doesn't want us, that Europe is actually punishing us before we even are there. What impression can it give to the societies of the candidate states if these actions are very, very intense already right now in this preparation process? I don't know which one of you would like to.
Yeah, thank you, Gordon. Very shortly, it really depends on how you communicate it with the public, because there can be one way how to communicate this in North Macedonia or Albania or Moldova or Ukraine. One way to be, well, these are, you know, bloody Europeans who come here with their values and want to change us and probably don't want to see us in the Union. There's another way. There's a way how the leadership in Chisinau, for example, can say, hey, we are opening this cluster in our accession talks, and Europe will help us actually to build the judiciary which is beneficial for our people. Europe will help us with their standards, with their advice, with their expertise, to build a system in which the bus driver could be more safe in his country, and the teacher could be more safe in his country. It all depends on that, actually. And I have a feeling, well, I'm definitely not an expert within your countries. When I say we, I talk more about European Union. But when we look from the other perspective, from the perspective of those countries who want to join, I have a feeling that these details are not explained well enough by the political leaders. There have been a lot of talks about, yes, we are going to Europe, we'll have more money, we'll have investments, we'll have single market, which is rightly so, and which are all those very, very important things why also Baltic countries joined the European Union 20 years ago. But the trickiest part is how you actually communicate to each and single citizen what is for him. He doesn't care that there would be some big company who will, you know, financially benefit and could be selling goods to Europe without barriers and taxation. He doesn't care about that. He would care what is happening, what is you know, changing on my street where I live, what is changing in my workplace, and it could be communicated more detailed, I believe, and it could be communicated more directly than it is now.
I mean, I think we're done with explaining, because Natalia mentioned that how many million of Moldovans have Romanian passports, which means that they could work in the EU. Balkan people do not have that kind of generous access, but actually if you go country by country, the number of EU passport holders has also increased. Also, if you come from the Balkans and you want to emigrate, until recently Germany was like an open door. and many other countries because there is a shortage of labor. So actually, the EU integration, it could be seen differently. It could be seen as an individual act where people vote with their feet, and then there is a leftover to be in the ditch in front of the fortress. And that's also an alternative business model, that the Western Balkans and maybe Ukraine will be the ditch in front of the fortress. Now, I want to challenge that model, because actually, I have to say, what's very interesting is that the likes of Orban and Vucic, they have a really, really bad war, because their business models are unsustainable. You know, in order to sustain a business model where, and now let me use my ex-Yugoslav past, where you will play Tito after Tito, so you will be non-aligned movement, you will get, oh, I'm open for every money, Chinese, Russian, Gulf countries, you name it. Actually, you need to have stability, and you have to have people to invest in this money. And as we can see, that business model is not attainable for themselves in the authoritarian countries that they're running. And I think that's an amazing opportunity, because Hungary is in the 5th year of economic recession. And Hungary's opposition soon will come into double digits. These people are not only about values, they're actually a lot about what's in their pocket. And there is less and less money in their pocket because they don't see the benefits of the European Union. And guess what they do? They emigrate. Now, we have to see that story side. I will quote an article from 2019 which aged really well. Federico Fubini, the editor-at-large at Corriere della Sera, did a back-of-an-envelope research how much the EU has benefited from a very interesting transfer union, not in cash, but in educated people. Only Germany alone got 100 billion euros in a span of 9 years in educated people. If you add Southern Europe, which was also subject, think Greece, Spain, Portugal, Italy, in the economic crisis, you can add 100 more billion euros. 200 billion euros of a free of charge tertiary education alone, not counting for the taxpayers' money into up to that point. I think, this is not to say, wow, Germany is bad, these people are good. It's actually, I want to encourage you to think, to broaden the horizon in which we think how those exchanges happen. And I have not even started talking about the profits that have been expatriated from Eastern Europe. Well, again, in the capitalist system, all good, but these are not insignificant. People have made significant amounts of money, fair and square, sometimes also with facilitation of the governments who have given them, who have outbidding each other. Example, Slovakia offered 35% of tax benefit to the BMW factory, and Hungary outbidded by giving it 50%. It's so interesting that the German ambassador in Hungary for years have been complaining that they cannot have an influence over German business because Hungarian government treats them with such a grace, and they earn so much money that actually the foreign policy does not matter. And why I'm saying this is not to criticize the German business. It's actually to sit down and say, where are the incentives? And are you ready now to do this and to have 1 billion of profit next year as projected loss when the Chinese business comes with 10 billion? Actually, economists have done that. The other issue is here, I think, guys, you really have to go on a field trip, but not to spread the gospel, but rather to listen. When you think that Europe is in war, think twice. I mean, I did a research, sorry, self-advertisement, I did a research. Actually, most Europeans think that Europe is not at war, including the place where I live. I live 5 minutes away from Iskander rocket landing from Kaliningrad to downtown Berlin. And still 50% of people there think that they don't live in a war. Well, this is probably an unlikely event, but still within the domain of probability. And if you go further there, you go to Spain. And then the last point, and I will stop on that. Let's not forget the classes. We forget the sort of the classes within each society. When I did the research for the paper, I talked to people in Poland. You know what they told me? The upper middle class and the elites have already bought flats in Spain. And they're ready to send their kids if there is conscription and whatnot. This is not how you build societal resilience if your elites check out. And we should not forget that also that kind of thinking permeates quite a lot throughout Europe, and one really has to work on that, because societies are resilient only if there is enough belief in the systems, and then we can call it good governance.
Yes, the stories about Estonian and Latvian villages freshly built in Portugal and Spain are reality already now. You mentioned this influence of, let's say, guest workers. In Germany, I think one hospital, they made an advert that they asked the, for example, medical team to stand up. They made a photo and said, please go away, everybody who is an immigrant here. So it's like in some units there are 1-2 German doctors probably, and all the nurses and technical staff are from the other countries. But
sorry, can I interrupt you? They're no longer guest workers. Germany changed their law. Germany now has a very liberal law to give citizenship. You know, B1 exam, 80% success, 5 years being in the country, demonstrating that you can sustain yourself, you become German. Actually, the likelihood that those people on that picture are already Germans that are not called Hans is very, very high.
well, this is the nickname of Latvians from Russian side, the guns. But but yeah. But but the one very uncomfortable question, but I want to talk about it. We talked a lot about possibilities, opportunities for traveling, for making business, but there is one very uncomfortable truth, I would say, that Europeans are scared from Ukrainian, for example, agriculture sector coming in, from their wheat, from their chickens, from their eggs, from anything. And lorry drivers in Spain and Portugal are also afraid and scared from Moldovan, Georgian, or any other kind of drivers who have probably different kinds of requirements and so on. How to explain again? We have mentioned already a couple of times that it is necessary to properly explain things, but how to explain that in not all sectors you will be welcomed, and there will be challenges if you become part of the European Union. We are in the European Union for a few decades already. We still are considered those. And this thing, how to explain again that these obstacles will be, and they have to be somehow being overcome.
So I realized as I was speaking last time that I sound more like an activist than I usually do. And I think it's Riga, you know, because last time I was in Riga was in 1989.
We're grumpy.
Last time I was in Riga was in 1989, and I came here with my choir, and I participated in the singing revolution. And, you know, to me, probably that was one of the things that shaped the rest of my life, because there was something bigger than that I participated in. And by the way, when I saw, I think 2 years ago was the festival, right? When there was this beautiful choir singing the Ukrainian anthem, and there are very few things that touched me so deeply. So what have we done to have that farmer only think about competition from Ukraine on the grain? What have we done to make that farmer believe that he can or she cannot compete and improve and do better? I mean, isn't the EU also about competition, also about, you know, constantly innovating and doing better? So I do think this is a question for politicians. So politicians in aspiring countries who have to explain and have to maintain people's faith and constantly work on their like how they understand the hierarchy of moral claims. I think this is a role for education systems. I think we've sort of gone too far again into the STEM and have forgotten philosophy and history and civics and governance and things that give people the sense of purpose. You know, purpose is not just sort of being comfortable in where you are. So yes, I think politicians in the EU, politicians in aspiring countries have to be better at explaining to people, you know, what is the higher purpose. And then also, professionally, they have to find solutions. So, for example, from what I know, Ukraine has put forward a proposal where, you know, they would not receive the same level of subsidies, for example. And they are willing. They are saying, look, for us, there is a higher purpose. We do know what sacrifice is. We can make exceptions to the treaty. You know, we can even say, you know, let's not have votes on 1, 2, 3, 4 for 10 years. Like I mean, we can find technical solutions. To me, we've sort of, on one hand, sort of lost touch with what European Union is about, and then two, we've gone sort of too technocratic and too bureaucratic in certain areas where we no longer can sort of make the bureaucracy work and come with policy, technocratic solutions that fit the modern times.
Yeah, I'll try to be as short as I can. It's nice that you been last time in Riga in the year I was born. But
Thank you for making me feel.
Look
No,
how the world has changed.
I just wanted to underline how young I am. But despite this fact, well, I am only 35 years old. But during my lifetime, my country has changed tremendously, like several times in a row. And I see it even more directly since I'm from Latgala region, which is on the border with Russia, which is historically the poorest region in the country and still is actually lacking behind. There's totally another debate on why is it so and what we can do with it. But even keeping that in mind, my own city has, well, I don't remember how it looked like 10 years ago. 20 years ago, it was like a different, different continent. It's totally different. It's totally overwhelmingly different. And this is actually very encouraging and inspiring. Towards those explanations, yes, I totally agree with you that there's a lot to do with the politicians. You very rightly mentioned about the enlargement process. They can be very different. And indeed, agriculture is very, very sensitive. And Ukraine, with a big sector, they are ready to, to apply things. They are ready to postpone things. They are ready to small subsidies at the beginning. I just remind you, well, when we became member state of European Union, does anyone has any idea how big agricultural subsidies were in our first years if we would compare with the average on European Union? Any guess? First year, it was 8% of the average. The second, it was 11. So it almost every year, it kind of, raised rates. We are still not in the middle point. We are currently around 80% of that, which is rather okay. But still, we are less competitive than some of the countries in the region like Greece or Malta, for example, who have historically very, very good terms. But it just means that, well, first of all, this is doable. If you as a country want to join in, you can agree to some things. And you can agree that some of your sectors will stay restricted for longer. So this is possible. And on the other side, for those lorry drivers in Spain or somewhere else, or for, I don't know, in Poland. Actually, this explanation is quite simple for them, but nobody is actually directly speaking with them. Yes, after some of the countries joining, there will be more people who would like to take the jobs and drive those lorries. But on the other side, you will have Ukraine, Moldova, other 5 or 6 countries inside the Union with larger markets. So that means that there will be more work for you. There will be enough work for everyone, because there will be just much more places to drive and much more places to deliver the goods. So, and once again, bureaucrats in Europe and politicians in Europe often want to provide very complicated answers to the general public. But general public doesn't want complicated answers. They want direct, simple answers which speaks with them. And we can kind of, think about it more and try to change our perspective as a politicians and how we speak with that. This probably is one of the ways how we can actually change over the years the perception of the public.
I want to make this panel really, really interesting because I really want to push back. And I want to push back on 2 accounts. One is explaining will not do the trick. We are beyond the times of explaining. We live in the world of influencing, not explaining. Second thing, what you just explained failed as a neoliberal logic inside the European Union. And if you don't trust me, let me bring you the analysis of the German painter whom I hired when I moved in my flat in Germany. My German painter very eloquently explained to me the following. He said, I do not mind these people from Bulgaria and Romania, smart enough not to mention Hungary and Macedonia. I don't mind these people coming here and getting the job. There is enough job for everybody. But I have 2 problems with that. One is that they cut my price, so I cannot really have to sustain my living. Second, then they go home for 6 months and they live on a much cheaper life cost in their home countries, and I don't have other country to go. I have to pay, my bills in Reinekesburg. So I have to live here. So explain me how to live. What also he didn't, and then he mentioned, but he didn't elaborate it because I wanted him to work on my bill. But the point is, he mentioned, like, if I had been a medical nurse or I had been a doctor, I would have been protected. If my trade was in a highly qualified professions, I would have been protected, because European Union protected those people. And actually it was interesting, he was leftist. Probably I would have not hired him if he was a radical right. I don't know where is he now, but more seriously, I think, you cannot explain. He has to pay the bills. And you cannot, I think a lot of Western European countries were fooling themselves. Hey, painter, why don't you become a philosopher? Actually, I have to say, probably had he been investing, he would have been a good social scientist. But check the social scientist salaries, really, really not very great income and earning, and not a great job market. So actually, those markets have not been open, and those markets have not delivered. So I think we have to go beyond this logic that, the market will solve this and they will have an opportunity. You know who has an opportunity? The same big concerns. And then, I'm not an expert on agricultural policy, but I really feel that to mention this in closing, we have to look at the detail. Actually, those farmers are profiting, but from the subsidies in the European agricultural policy, it's well documented that the main profit goes to few companies who make a very good living out of it for them and their shareholders. And also, let's be honest on the other side, who owns the agricultural complex in Ukraine? And how that's done. That's also not a very shiny social democratic story. It has its own undertones. And you know what? I think the sooner we take this, even if we don't like it, but we accept it, and we talk honestly and genuinely, as Natalia mentioned, I think people will say, okay, a lot of people know what tough life is, and they will sort of work with it. You guys went through unprecedented, you guys here in Latvia, you went to almost 20% decline in GDP after the economic crisis. You didn't cry, although probably you had all the reasons to cry of unfair.
We did.
No, but you cried, but you also, you moved on. No, but you moved on. And frankly, now, 15 years later, we could say, oh my goodness, how stupid we could be to make such policies. And now, those who didn't do the policies fought back. And I think it's time now for, let's call it the new Portugals. It's time, Portugal at that time resisted. And now it's hailed, oh wow, you were a miracle. I think this is now where the Latvias, the Estonias, but many other smaller stories and thinking are much more apt. They're probably much better with thinking about solutions that will work out not only for them, but for Germany, for France, and the others. And I think one has to really push those perspectives. I mean, I don't want to mention the Scandinavians, because actually I would love to copy so many of the things that they do, but I also understand that there is a limitation, because most of European societies are not Scandinavian societies.
They live in another world there.
No, look, but also their world is not without challenges. But what I want to mention is that actually those visions of Europe at the moment are more apt, and we really have to think of policies, and policies that will address the painter in Berlin and others, rather than explaining only.
Okay, thank you. We have a couple of minutes for questions. Any questions?
Hi everyone, my name is Sardor Ganiyev. I'm from Uzbekistan. So it's an honor to meet you here. And my question to Ms. Gabrielita. So, considering your background as professional economist, what about your view or your policy regarding support your local industry during integration, as you mentioned before? So some special measures or incentives that's proper for being after being integrated to European Union also. Can you inform more detail? Thank you.
Maria Golubeva, Baltic Initiative on EU reform. The question is as follows. Do you think the economic implications are complicated, as we just heard, about protecting the people with their livelihoods and, on the other hand, giving a chance to people and to economies in the candidate countries? But if we move back to good governance as the key topic of this discussion, do you think there is some crucial challenge in terms of good governance? I mean, for example, reform of the judiciary, or regulation in some particular area, or still the fight with corruption. Is there some aspect where the EU has simply not yet sufficiently delivered in supporting candidate countries to do the homework, and where it should really speed its act up and do things much faster and much better?
I'll start with the support to local industry. I believe in support to local industry, but I believe in a specific type of support. So I'm a big fan of sort of evidence-based policies, and also sort of listening to your people and understanding sort of how you can, having a vision and then understanding how you can make a transformation. I'll give you an example. When the war started, this is for Russia's invasion in Ukraine. This is the first time Moldova's border on the Transnistrian region's territory was closed. So this is the first time Moldova actually controlled its borders. And by the way, this caused the Transnistrian region to now have majority trade with the EU. This makes us very different from Georgia, for example. So even the Transnistrian region is now trading more with the EU than any other part of the world. And I gathered all of the meat producers from Moldova, and I said, look, this is a window of opportunity. I don't know how long this is going to last, but you no longer have the imports from Belarus and Ukraine. And at the same time, and I brought the Food Security Agency, we were very close to being listed for processed meat with imported inputs from the EU, eggs and milk. And we were doing extraordinarily fast reforms on food security standards. So I said, please, I understand there's a war going on, but invest in your own quality capabilities and quality systems so that you can quickly qualify, get the market, and then become competitive. Because one of our problems has been our size, right? Guess how many invested? 0, exactly. And we created the Organization for Development of Entrepreneurship, gave subsidized support, so just like the Polish Development Bank, KfW, or other development banks. I believe in these programs. At the same time, I can give another examples where, because of the energy crisis, exactly through the same type of development organizations, we have given subsidized funding to go to renewables. We saw huge success, huge. So immediately, basically, this program was taken up. We saw an increase in production of renewables. We saw people save. You know, we saw sort of that this really made them go there. I think we should negotiate with the EU transition period so that we can continue to support the industry, but at the same time, give them a very clear deadline and say, look, you have 2 years, we'll give you the programs, but if you can't do it, I'm sorry, because there are higher goals. So, and by the way, European Union does not limit this. So I was surprised when I was Prime Minister that, you know, we have free economic zones. We were not ready to give them up, but according to our association agreement, by the way, not yet a membership agreement, association agreement, we were supposed to phase them out by 2024. And when I mentioned, you know, I said, you know, I think we're in a new age of industrial policy. You know, the US had just adopted the Inflation Reduction Act. European Union was also changing its view on industrial policy. So I said, we want to change the association agreement. And what I heard from bureaucrats, both in Moldova and in the EU, is that, oh, no, this is too complicated of a process. And I said, I don't care. Because I never had a disagreement with Gentiloni on this. You know, it's about sort of basically thinking through these issues, thinking at sort of how this can work, and then making it happen. So what we are limited in Moldova by is actually our capacity to do policy impact analysis and then to convince sort of specific actors to invest in a certain way.
Answering Maria's question very, very shortly, I do believe personally that all the support the European Union actually provides to the possible member states is very sufficient, and actually sufficient enough for them to become competitive enough when they are inside the European Union. The question is how ready they are to take this support and how ready they are to implement it. And there will always be this discussion with the bureaucrats whether they do want to change something or they don't want to change something. And that's why there are politicians who actually should show their power and should tell the bureaucrats, okay, we agree with you on 90%, but these are the things that just work out. Just work out, find the solution how we do it. And this is how we proceed. It's on the politician's side. Bureaucrats never want to change anything. That's a major fact.
One, just to Maria, everybody thinks about reforms in this kind of more civil servants, bureaucratic manner and whatnot. I think the best way that the European Union can show to the candidate countries that it's really serious about its rule of law is actually demonstrating enormous will and getting Hungary to be able, Hungarian people, as their public opinion shows very clearly, to be able to change their government that is a model of a bad governance. Because if you demonstrate by example that bad governance will eventually lose out inside the European Union, there is nothing more powerful. You show that that business model is not lucrative for the people who will copy it. And I think that's much bigger than I mean, all other reforms have to continue, but I think the answers is political, and that means also coming down from the moral high ground, because I hear a lot of liberal-minded politicians and people saying, oh, but we're not going to be like Orban and support media in Slovenia, Bosnia, Serbia, Macedonia, Georgia, Moldova, you name it, where. We don't want to do this kind of influence operations. No. You don't need to do influence operations. You actually have the modality through civil society, through independent media, through funding to support that the real information comes, and then trust that when there is an access to that information, the citizens could make that. In Hungary, citizens do not have a real information, and still the margin between the voters for the opposition and Orban at the moment is 9%. That's close to heroic given the darkness of the information space. And I think, just think politics and think by example rather than only into sort of necessary, but a bit more, not only boring, but hard to understand bureaucratic reforms.
Just to round up, I have 3 words to round it: communicate, explain, and negotiate. And then you will see probably the light at the end of the tunnel. No, that was the spring sun that disappeared already. So sorry sorry for being late, and have a nice next panel. Thank you.